Welcome back. Last night, President Biden announced the United States killed Ayman al-Zawahri, an al-Qaeda terrorist who played a key role in the planning of the 9/11 attacks and who became al-Qaeda's leader after the death of Osama bin Laden. According to a senior administration official, U.S. intelligence was able to locate al-Zawahri in a Taliban-supported safe house in downtown Kabul, raising questions and concerns that the Taliban is not upholding counterterrorism-related commitments it made as part of the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. The strike comes as we near the one-year anniversary of that chaotic American withdrawal, which President Biden defended in his remarks last night.
When I ended our military mission in Afghanistan almost a year ago, I made the decision that after 20 years of war, the United States no longer needed thousands of boots on the ground in Afghanistan to protect America from terrorists who seek to do us harm. And I made a promise to the American people that we continue to conduct effective counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan and beyond. We've done just that.
I am joined now by retired General David Petraeus, former director of the CIA and commander of U.S. Central Command. General, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So what is your reaction to the news, and how important of a blow is this operationally to al-Qaeda, or is this more symbolic given that he was 71 years old?
Well, it's a bit of both. It's a very significant blow. It's a huge achievement by our intelligence and counterterrorism communities. It is significant in the sense that he did in recent years declare, for example, a new affiliate in the Indian subcontinent. He has continued to exhort his followers at various times to attack infidels and so forth. But on the other hand, he was not issuing direct guidance. He wasn't guiding operations. He was no longer as active as he was when he was the brains of al-Qaeda, as he used to be described, partnering with Osama bin Laden since the late 1990s and planning and then overseeing the execution of the attacks, as you mentioned, including the 9/11 attacks, but also the USS Cole, and also the bombing of the embassies in East Africa, among a number of others. So it's a very significant blow, but it also reflects in a way the fact that al-Qaeda has been decentralized very considerably, and it also has been degraded, but we still must keep an eye on it. And particularly now that we see that the Taliban are not living up to their part of the Doha Agreement, the commitment to not shelter national extremists on their soil.
Well, let me actually, to that point, my colleague Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show did ask National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about that, about the fact that he was being harbored by Taliban leaders. Let me just play you a little bit of what he had to say and then get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
We believe that there were senior members of the Haqqani network who are affiliated with the Taliban who did know that Zawahiri was in Kabul. There may have been other members of the Taliban who did not know. We have already been engaged with the Taliban, and I'm not going to preview any further actions that we will take to ensure that the Taliban lives up to its commitments not to allow any external plotting from Afghanistan, but rest assured the United States will be vigilant on that.
General, he says the United States will be vigilant, but what actions do you think need to be taken? For obvious reasons, he's keeping his cards very close to the vest. But can you be specific about what you think needs to happen, given that we have determined that the Taliban was hiding this al-Qaeda leader in a safe harbor?
First of all, I think it was a very fair assessment that he made. The person harboring him was really the number two in this group of the Taliban and the Haqqani network. Siraj Haqqani has a 10 million bounty on his head as well, I might add. He's also the acting Minister of Interior, but it's not net certain that the Taliban leader overall knew this was going on. That said, this clearly reflects the imperative to keep an eye and pressure on extremists in Afghanistan who are trying to take advantage of the fact that the Taliban are now in charge. And I should note that the group that is most worrisome actually is not al-Qaeda's senior leadership. It's actually the Islamic State Khorasan group, the affiliate of the Islamic State that's established in Afghanistan and Western Pakistan. They're the ones carrying out the most significant attacks in Afghanistan, trying to foment sectarian civil war there.
Well, and General, as you know, when President Biden withdrew troops a year ago from Afghanistan, it was widely seen as a botched effort. But one of the concerns was exactly what you point to. Would the U.S. have the same level of ability to engage in counterterrorism, the type of operation that was carried out over the weekend? Now, the White House would say, look, this is a vindication that the strategy is, in fact, working. What say you about this? Do you have any concerns that without a robust footprint there, that the United States doesn't have enough eyes and ears on the ground?
Well, first of all, I would not assume that we don't have a network still active there. One presumes that some of the confirmation process and other activities have been facilitated by that. The question, though, is not whether we could carry out single attacks such as this. In fact, I predicted we would be able to carry out over the horizon attacks and operations. The challenge is if you have to carry out a campaign. We don't see a need for that just yet. But as our chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, it only takes 6 months to a couple of years to see these groups reconstitute themselves. And I think the concern, therefore, is over the longer term, not at the immediate time right now. But again, a huge tribute to those in our intelligence and counterterrorism communities for what they've done. This is a very significant blow in the brains behind al-Qaeda for many, many decades.
General, before I let you go, I do have to get your reaction to this breaking news that we are tracking, which is that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has now landed in Taiwan. As you know, China has had some very strong language warning her not to go. She's there shining a light on the human rights abuses by China, on the situation on the ground. What is your take on her trip? Are you concerned that this might inflame tensions that are already pretty high right now?
There's a lot of different takes on this, but the one that I think is generally broadly agreed is that there will be repercussions as a result of this. There sort of have to be. Again, President Xi is in the final months of his own re-election campaign. In late October, early November, the Party Congress will convene and re-elect him for an unprecedented third term. He hoped that everything would be nice and smooth. It has not been, given Russia, given Ukraine, given the economy slowing down, given the real estate developers collapse and so forth. So this will add to that, but the pressure will be on him. He will have to take actions, and I think they won't just be in the near term.
Military actions, General? Military actions? What are? Can you give us?
No.
Okay.
No. You'll see live fire exercises. You'll see demonstrations. I don't think no one wants to see a confrontation, and I think each side has been very careful to avoid that. Even the flight path of Speaker Pelosi's plane went out east of the Philippines to come in from the other side, not the most direct route from Singapore.
General David Petraeus, thank you so much for joining us on a very big news day and for helping us to understand all of these complicated issues. Good to see you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.